Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are plunging straight into a wildly grim, dark, gothic fable to witness the terrifying breakdown of human reason at the hands of a figure known as the Crimson Reaper. Okay, let's dive right into this, because this isn't just your standard spooky story. It's actually a profound, heavily Nietzschean exploration of philosophy, psychology, and the absolute limits of human logic. We're going to look at what happens when the very structures we build to protect our minds are suddenly put on trial by a completely unstoppable force.
We begin this mythic descent not with a frantic marketplace, but with this incredibly chilling verdict from the Red Spectre. This really sets the stage for a cosmic trial where intellect itself is literally on the chopping block. Listen to this. Your reason is but a beautifully tailored prison where you serve as your own executioner. That is such a powerful thesis, right? The central argument we're exploring today is that the logic and rationality we rely on so heavily aren't actually freeing us at all. They are, in fact, trapping us.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the arrival in high time where the clock simply stops.
Imagine you're in a bustling bazaar. It's full of human striving, petty barters, the works. But then, the clock just suddenly stops. In this unnatural stillness, which is known as high time, the bustling noise of all our daily transactions for meaning drops into an absolute deafening silence. The sources describe this as this strange, uncanny vibration. The marketplace, which represents all of our frantic human striving and our desperate bartering for purpose, just completely halts. That frantic, amusing choreography of our daily lives is entirely suspended in an instant.
And into that dead silence steps our judge. Descending from what's called the heart of negation, the Red Spectre manifests as the Crimson Reaper. But pay attention to the visual detail here. You'll notice he is wearing a plague doctor's mask. Why? Well, it's not to protect himself from a physical disease. He wears it to filter out the overwhelming stench of humanity's unexamined ugliness. The texts explicitly define him as the superego of humanity's shadow. He is the ultimate judge, coming to force us to finally look at all those repressed, ugly truths we constantly try to hide behind our busy marketplace activities.
Moving on to Section 2, The Reaper's 5 Parables, which is essentially a clinical autopsy of a doomed society.
As the Reaper walks among the merchants, he absolutely does not bargain. Instead, he delivers this clinical autopsy of a doomed society through 5 devastating parables. He brilliantly maps physical elements of the marketplace to these grim philosophical realities, breaking down human illusion piece by piece. First up is the gilded counterfeit. He points his scythe at their coins, revealing their wealth is just nihil, utter meaninglessness. It's systemic spiritual bankruptcy disguised as a desperate bargain of forbidden knowledge and petty certainties. Next is the beak of truth. The Reaper's mask actually filters the chatter of the bazaar into the funeral of truth. The merchant's words aren't communication, they're literally tombstones for dead thoughts. Then we have the weighing scale. He doesn't weigh gold, he weighs the spirit of gravity. Every single shopper carries this microscopic shadow of repressed trauma that violently erupts outward, calcifying into 12-foot stone gargoyles of existential dread that crush them. Insane, right? Finally, the crimson diagnosis. His crimson eyes look past their deeds to judge their raw becoming, diagnosing their entire world as an architecture of stasis.
Which brings us to the 5th and honestly the most terrifying act, the parable of the final transaction. This initiates the absolute execution. The Reaper completes his circuit and triggers what the sources call the final spill. He raises his crimson robes, unleashing a living ink that completely drowns the marketplace. Stalls, shoppers, everything. All that something of their busy morning is revealed to be nothing more than a temporary stain on the grand nothing of the universe. Their lives are permanently, completely erased by this ink blot negation, returning the noisy marketplace to the silent oblivion of the void.
Now let's look at Section 3, The Verdict on Human Reason, focusing on the Spectre's diatribe.
Just before the final spill consumes them entirely, the Spectre delivers this theatrical diatribe that mocks the very foundation of the marketplace's existence. The crucial point really boils down to this. Is human reason our greatest sanctuary, or is it our ultimate prison? The Reaper forces us to look at our fierce, desperate assertions of free will. We always think we're in control, don't we? But he asks if this is truly mastery, or just a frantic, amusing choreography of a jester performing for a totally indifferent universe. Are we really just marionettes pulling our own strings?
And this brings us to the superego's ultimate verdict on the shadow. He says,
You spent your lives accumulating the toxic harvest of knowledge, yet you never realized that every gain was merely nourishment for the hunger that now dines upon your why. Wow, through the Spectre's atavistic fire, our hyperanalysis and all our intellectual defense mechanisms are completely exposed. They aren't armor at all. They are the very weights dragging us deeper into the ink. We thought we were building fortresses against the dark, but we were actually just feeding a cosmic hunger.
The Spectre's internal monologue reveals the profound fragility of human reason. He diagnoses our so-called logical sanctuaries as nothing more than an architecture of stasis. It's a monument to universal futility built entirely to hide our own fear. This is super fascinating because it directly mirrors Nietzsche's own warnings about modernity. Nietzsche warned that in our quest for ultimate comfort and absolute logic, we risk engineering away our own drive to exist. We took the Nietzschean arrow of longing, our core drive for becoming and greatness, and we converted it into a parasitic, self-destructive obsession with petty commerce and intellectual safety. The Reaper's scythe, as he tells them, is merely the final punctuation mark on the sentence of their existence.
This leads us right into Section 4, Trial of the Noble Soul, the ultimate struggle. So when the chaotic fire of the final spill washes away the marketplace, what happens when it encounters a noble soul? Here is the stark visual contrast. On one side, we have the ignoble soul. As we've seen, this soul acts like a dead weight sinking into the ink, totally crushed by the calcified spirit of gravity, because it relied way too heavily on those fragile logical sanctuaries. But the noble soul? The noble soul is entirely different. It must withstand total negation without the crutch of logic. When the Red Spectre attacks, it's a brutal battle of will against chaotic fire. The noble soul has to watch its logical sanctuaries get burned to absolute ash, facing the raw, unshaped will of the Spectre head-on, judged purely on its endurance in high time.
In this ultimate struggle, which is known as the final summoning, the dynamic completely shifts into a raw, elemental trial. The Spectre's crimson eyes drop their detached irony. They stop judging past deeds and focus entirely on the soul's raw becoming, its actual capacity to endure absolute destruction. The Red Spectre demands the Untergang, the total going under or destruction of all structures. Human reason is definitively proven to be a beautifully tailored prison that simply cannot withstand the Spectre's return. The soul must stand utterly naked before the merciless tribunal of the Age of Negation, with its entire history exposed as nothing more than a fleeting ripple in the heart of negation.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If your logical sanctuaries were burned to ash today, would you vanish in the ink blot negation like those frantic merchants of the bazaar? Or would you, like the noble soul, find the raw strength of becoming to remain standing? Think about it, how much of your own world is built on the gilded counterfeit of reason, and how would you fare in the deafening silence of high time?